Hi, everybody. I'm Kathy Feebeck,
Uh-oh.
host two debut authors on their book launch day. Both books came out today. Claire Holroyd and Julie Carrick Dalton. Claire's local to the store, and The Effort is her first novel, although she's been writing her entire life, in addition to being a full-time graphic designer. In exciting news, the New York Times listed The Effort as new and noteworthy this week, and I am so excited to read it. Julie Carrick Dalton is an organic farmer with a master's degree in literature and creative writing from Harvard's Extension School. From what I've read, she has a knack for finding herself in interesting places when major events are happening, which you can certainly ask her about during the Q&A. Waiting for the Night Song is her first novel. The program tonight will be an hour long. Both authors will speak about their books, and we will make sure to leave 15 minutes at the end for your questions. Since we have such a good turnout, I ask that you put your questions into the chat, and I'll do my best to ask most of them at the end. Please remember that you can order Claire and Julie's books from mainpointbooks.com. Since Claire is local, she will be signing and personalizing hers tomorrow at the store, so make sure to write in the comment section everything you would like her to say. And we're hopefully going to work it out with Julie so that we can get signed books we can also deliver from the store. So also be sure to write that in. I'm going to mute everyone while the authors are speaking, and at the end, you're welcome to unmute yourselves again. Now, for the interesting part.
So hi, everyone. My name is Claire Holroyd, and I am local to the area. I was born in Bryn Mawr Hospital, and I went to Notre Dame Academy for high school. So Main Point Books is my neighborhood bookstore, and I love them. They deserve our support. And just a reminder that, Amazon doesn't have author events like this, and they don't have brick and mortar stores in our communities, and they don't employ our friends and family. So if you're thinking of purchasing my book or Julie's book, or both my book and Julie's book, please consider Main Point Books, because they're fantastic. In that segue, I am so thrilled that Julie said yes when I invited her here tonight. It was kind of like a, really? Oh, really? Oh, you're gonna do it! So it's very exciting. She's a big deal. Her book Waiting for the Night Song debuts today. We are book birthday twins. And it's been a pick on USA Today, CNN, Newsweek, and a whole host of others. And I'd love to, I'm sure Julie will do a better job of introducing herself. Julie, do you want to say hi to everyone?
Hi, can everybody hear me okay? Yeah, so I was so glad to get your phone call, Claire, because Claire and I met in a debut author group, and we had this instant connection because both of our books have a common theme in them. So I was so grateful that you wanted me to be here with you tonight. And I live in Boston, but I do have a connection that I didn't know about till just now. My husband was also born in Bryn Mawr Hospital.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, he lived in Percy and Radnor for a little bit. So he has some roots in the area. So Waiting for the Night Song is also my debut novel. And as Kathy said, I am a farmer and I'm a writer. And this book is also asks some what if questions about climate, just like Claire's asks some big what if questions. Mine is a contemporary story about climate change that's happening in a slow burning, quiet way right now, as opposed to Claire's, which is like a bigger story. And I love that we're going to be able to talk about the dynamics between these two ways of telling climate stories. So I'm just really grateful to be here with you. I'm so excited about your book. It's an important book, and I love seeing all your friends and family here too to celebrate your book coming out in the world. And I just can't wait to start talking about it. So I know you had some things you wanted to say to kind of get started.
Great, thank you so much, Julie. I'm so happy to have you here. So let me introduce The Effort. This is it. So this is a novel that will hit shelves today. Yay! Yeah, silent claps. It will be launching with Grand Central Publishing, which is an imprint of Hachette, and I'm very grateful to my publisher. I'd like to talk about the story structure. In the prologue, we have an observatory that spots a comet on the edge of our blind spot as it's coming out from behind the sun. And that's kind of the inciting incident. The scientific community is very quick to respond. And they basically fly experts down to a European spaceport in French Guiana, which is on the South American equator. Basically, they want to use the rotational velocity of the Earth to help propel the rocket. And so
Oh my God.
Oh my God. Why did I get Therese on there? Claire, I'm just trying to mute some of the ones. If you wouldn't mind unmuting yourself, I think I muted you by accident.
no worries. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent.
Turn it back up.
So if everyone could mute their phones. Hey guys.
Unmuted.
Okay, great. Sorry guys. So the mission, yes. So there's they form an international effort that is to defend the planet, and that is nicknamed the Effort. Concurrently, we have a second mission that was already underway, and that is the last Arctic expedition of a polar icebreaker. And in this second setting, there are scientists collecting samples and data. There's the Coast Guard, which is with the US military. And there are two guest passengers, a photojournalist and an artist, that are there to document the Arctic before it is changed by climate change. So this is a different mission, but it's still the same effort to defend the planet from harm. So the reader will follow these two missions for the first third of the book, as the trajectory arc is calculated with more accuracy by astronomers, and the impact, the odds of impact keep increasing and ratcheting up as you go through the book. Then more settings are introduced, and they begin to shuffle to show the reactions and consequences outside of these two insular missions. One of these additional settings is the Bronx, and that's where I'm going to give a 5-minute reading from the book, where it's between two characters. One is named Rivka, and the other is named Love. And Love is originally from Kenya. She was raised in an orphanage, and they ran out of virtues like grace and chastity and charity. So they had to get creative, and they called her Love, just to give a description of why she has that name. So this is chapter 14. This is about a third in the book when the settings start to change. When it came to loving Love, there was no choice. From the moment Rivka first saw her, all she could think was, good God. Love carried herself like a queen with soaring cheekbones and full pouty lips that could smile wide when you least expected it. One day she caught Rivka's adoring stare on Columbia University's campus. Which languages can you speak? Love asked as a way of introduction. English, French, and Spanish, Rivka replied. Love laughed with a wide and flirtatious smile, revealing a charming gap in between her front two teeth. 3, that's it? Rivka was a goner. Love taught a few classes in comparative literature and society, but earned her reputation as a literary translator. The two women stayed awake into the early hours at Rivka's apartment in Harlem. Love pulled papers from her satchel and read sections of novels. Pause and touched like her haze of hair, which spilled over her pillow in brown ringlets. When she continued, Love's Russian was a thick staccato, her Italian smooth and honeyed. Despite the intensity of their relationship, there was still an unsaid understanding that Love was exactly where she needed to be, doing exactly what she needed to do in order to survive in the long term. Or, as Love put it, until a computer program can properly translate the beauty of a novel. At 29, Rivka was younger than Love and in an earlier stage of her career. In order to launch, she would have to leave. Rivka stopped applying to postdocs. After defending her thesis, she took an underpaid adjunct position. Rivka's parents couldn't forgive a lapsed Catholic lesbian lover from Kenya. Are you trying to put me in an early grave? Her father shouted into the phone. Rivka was disowned and cut off emotionally and financially from her family. She sublet her Harlem apartment and moved into the South Bronx with Love. Colorful drapes, blankets, throw rugs, and pillows couldn't warm the drafty rooms or muffle the traffic and shouting. Rivka could tell that Love didn't put much faith in the longevity of their relationship. Through her Kenyan eyes, Rivka and her fellow Americans were spoiled, fickle, and untested. While there might be some truth to that, it didn't mean they were weak. Rivka vowed to prove herself as resourceful and strong. When their apartment was vandalized and all her grandmother's jewelry stolen, Rivka said nothing. A decent chunk of her savings disappeared in exchange for a new deadbolt and floor guard. And she stayed. The sex was amazing. It was the intimacy that was lacking. Rivka wanted a sense of ownership between them, but Love, an orphan and nomadic scholar, was never allowed to own anything. She was only allowed to learn the language of a given land before she had to pack up and move on. When a call came in the middle of the night, Love put it on mute and whispered that a rep from the United Nations was on the line. There was no hesitation in answering the call of duty, all despite Love's claim to be finished with UN contract work. When the call ended, Love stood dumbstruck. I thought it was Al-Shabaab, she said, or just more of the usual danger. She recovered enough to wrestle her old battered suitcase out from the back of her bedroom closet. I have to go now, Love said. There's a car waiting outside. Rivka asked what the hell was going on, but Love said little as she packed up some clothes and essential toiletries. The UN needed expert interpreters, she said, and they needed them fast. Love stripped off her oversized t-shirt and pulled on underwear, a pair of straight-leg jeans, a cotton blouse with bright patterns, and her leather motorcycle boots despite the August heat. Rivka grabbed Love by the shoulders. This is crazy. I have to go, Love insisted, wresting herself from Rivka's frightened grip. I don't have a choice. Everyone has a choice, Rivka shot back. She was a hypocrite, but she didn't care. Love finally looked her in the eyes. Stock up on food and water. What? A car horn blared from the street outside. Food, water, supplies, and cash. Cash, Love said. Empty your bank accounts. There's some kind of natural disaster on the way, something big. She strode over to their bed and leaned across the mattress to reach Rivka's pillow. You need to prepare, she called over her shoulder. That was it. That was goodbye. Rivka listened to Love's unlaced boots travel down the stairwell. You know your name? Rivka asked the walls. Love? In America, we call that false advertising. She had saved that great line only to waste it on a closed door. When Rivka returned to bed, she saw Love's switchblade resting on her pillow. Love never left the apartment without it concealed on her person. Here she had left it for Rivka. If the switchblade could talk, it would say, stay alive. So that's 5 minutes of the effort. And basically you see, it's a flashback where Love is recruited to the effort and Rivka is left to deal with the consequences and just what is happening as the odds of impact increase and the media is pushing it through. So with that, I'd love to open up discussion with Julie.
Great. Well, thank you for reading that. That was a really great way to get into the story, because I think you set us up what the big stakes are. But what I love is that you brought us in with intimacy between two people. And I remember when you and I were first talking about your book, one of the things you said to me was how much you love all of your characters. And you said it with, I could hear in your voice, this attachment to all the people that you created. And while I want to get into a bigger conversation about the science and the drama and the excitement of the story, I thought maybe we could start and talk about the people in it, because you have a lot of love for these people. And that's why I love that you opened with this scene, because you just like illustrated for us a relationship instead of starting with, an asteroid. You started with humans. So can we talk a little bit about how you created your characters and how you fell in love with them so much?
Sure. I guess I kind of thought, who would we need for a mission? And it kind of came up with Ben Schwartz, who leads the effort, and he's from JPL in Pasadena. He's with NASA, and he's with the Near Earth Objects Center Studies. And I wanted, and he is kind of what you would think of just someone who's extremely gifted with hard math skills and very much a scientist. But I I wanted him to kind of have an interesting foil. And so I had him, his partner is named Amy Kowalski, and she is a tech recruiter, but she's also a bit of a nerd groupie in a way. She loves science fiction. She loves Star Wars and comics and things like that. Like she usually does conventions and CosCom and that kind of a thing. She's someone that you wouldn't expect when you put them together. You just wouldn't think of the two of them together. So I thought that would be an interesting way. And this whole time it's like she's reading the story, and I have kind of meta jokes where she believes that she's in this science fiction story when it's like, but it's really real life. So I thought, that's who would lead the effort. But then I wondered about just all the nationalities coming in. I wondered about how would you interpret what they were saying to each other in real time. And so I came up with Love Mwangi from Kenya, who is a master linguist. And she is kind of called, even though she's trying to start a different life for herself in New York, and she's wants to be a translator for literature. She does do UN contract work, and she kind of gets poached by the effort. And she is someone who kind of gets into the Tower of Babel and tries to tear down the walls between them. And then I also thought about the polar icebreaker, and that's like a very interesting dynamic because you have coasties, and they're called the Coast Guard. They're called coasties, and they're military, and they definitely have that kind of dynamic. I mean, they're under Homeland Security, and then you have scientists who are away from their families for a very long time, and they're out there to study. They take core samples of the ice. They take water sampling. They're trying to map the chemistry of the oceans, and they're trying to, get mercury levels and things like that. And you have and ice extent, and a lot of but then I also wanted to soften that scientific hard data, which is very necessary. I also wanted to soften that with artists. And it's true that actually, so the polar mission is a real mission, and the ship is a real ship. It's a US Coast Guard cutter Healy. And they invite guests to experience the Arctic through the eyes of artists. And so and I wanted it to be a photojournalist because I wanted to bring in an artist who documents with a lens. And it's very much, he takes images that there's no gray, it's black or white with kind of what he captures with his camera. But then I also wanted a poet who I would bring in. And the poet is interesting. The poet is actually an activist. And his name is Gustavo Waiapi, and he is a member of a tribe and in Brazil, where he is kind of fighting extradition, and you find that out in a bit later. But he's fighting extradition by going on this ship to see the Arctic through the eyes of a poet before it changes irrevocably. And then I also wanted to show the scientists, and I have Dr. Maya Gutierrez, who works at the Marine Science Institute in Santa Barbara. And I wanted to have someone who is just absolutely in love with science and her job. And she's a great character. She's kind of spunky, and I call her like the true soldier, because she's just, before the comet kind of takes hold of the narrative, you see her in her element, and you see her witness a gray whale. You see her do rosette castings off the side of the ship. And she said, in this moment, I wouldn't trade places with anyone in the world. And so I loved having that as well. So it was kind of these two missions that are out to save the Earth in very different ways. And they have these ecosystems where perfect strangers become family almost, and like very tight organizations. But they're blocked off from the rest of the world as civilization starts to fall apart. So that's why we get into what happens outside, where the reader is kind of blinded as well until you are introduced to what happened. And after, like, I'd say a third of the book, you start shuffling with what is happening. And we go to Mexico. I go to the International Space Station. I start shuffling to show what is happening when people are coming across an existential crisis of what is going to happen with a doomsday clock.
And I love that we talk as writers, we talk about the ticking clock in a novel, the thing that you're waiting for to happen, that you not only have a clock, but you keep changing it a little bit when the projections about the coming disaster, they keep getting tighter and tighter, which it compels the reader because you feel that sense of pressure growing. But I love hearing you talk about these characters because I feel like you're talking about real people. As you're talking about them, I can tell you know so much about these characters. It isn't even in the book, and it's apparent that you put a lot into creating the characters, and they feel very real because I can tell by listening to you that they are real in a way, and they're that I'm sure that they're a lot of them based on real people and real situations, and that you drew on a lot of real science and things that are going on, but you filled them up with real humanity and relationships, which is what makes a reader want to stay with the story so much, because of what's happening between the people, not just the story. So I think I applaud you for that, because it's a compelling story, but it's also populated by compelling people, which is what kind of, it's always about the emotions, at least for me anyway. A great plot is great, but if the people don't really get you, then you're not as invested. So I think you did such a great job with creating, populating this complicated situation. But I'd love to hear about what your research was like, because obviously there's a lot of research. Most writers take on a topic, ice breaking or, a comet, but you took on this vast, from the Amazon, the Arctic to, being on a ship, all these scenes. I'd love to hear about what your process was like.
Yeah, I guess I'm so lucky to live in this age of the internet, where I can watch a video of someone on a polar icebreaker, and I can hear the crunching sound of snow hitting the hull. I can find, there's photo archives on Wiki Commons of the European spaceport. I can go on, TripAdvisor, and see people going through this spaceport as tourists. And it's a firsthand perspective of a spaceport at the equator. So I'm so lucky to be born in this age where I have so much information at my fingertips, and also so many publications. My husband and I are huge readers, and we love. We have the New York Times. We have the New Yorker. We have the Financial Times, and we're on constantly. And I also have a mother who is a huge collector of research, who who likes to save clippings for me. But I mean, and she's always, my parents have always been up on current events, and knowing what's happening out in the world, doing research, The Economist, The Guardian, and also getting an international perspective. Those were very important. And so I would say just constantly having that influx of information, and in-depth too. It's not just, like quick online stuff. It would be really in-depth reportage. I would say, like, just tackling that, taking notes, and getting as much firsthand experience as I can. And I know that I was a bit envious of how you got to the more personal in Waiting for the Night Song, and you did firsthand experience of what you witnessed on your farm. I didn't get as much firsthand experience with going to the Amazon or going to the Arctic. I'm not sure I would have made it back if I did. Those are pretty serious ecosystems, and that's why they still exist today, although they are under threat. Yeah.
The idea for this story came about? Like, was there a moment or a news article you read, or like one thing that crystallized that you had to write this story?
It came about in a couple of different ways. The comet, it actually started, I think 2003, there was, Mars made a close pass to Earth, and it was in newspapers as observatories around the world were kind of like celebrating, and they were having parties to watch this close pass. And I remember thinking like, well, how close? How close? Why is everyone smiling in these photos? And I just started, close was relative. I found out as I read the article, it was not that close, but it just got me thinking about cosmic impacts. And then I started just looking at, of course, what hit the asteroid that we believe is what caused the extinction of the dinosaurs, and just how much of an impact that was to Earth, and how much energy must have, resulted from that. And the more I looked at it, the more I realized that there are so many cosmic impacts and so many asteroids and comets kind of like whizzing around that I never really knew about or cared about. And so I just kept researching that. So that was kind of like the seed, I would say. But I also I couldn't help but have, the Arctic and the Amazon kind of speak to me and come out. And I remember I read an article in The Economist about how underneath there's like a crust of a thick crust of ice at the North Pole, and there are these I don't know if they're like krill or something like that, and their whole ecosystem was being altered, and they weren't hibernating. So it was just, even at the top of the world, underneath this huge crust of ice, that is changing because of what we are doing. Even that. So I guess that's where the Arctic started to come in. And then I started researching, and then, I started finding out about polar icebreakers as research vessels that would go out and kind of document this information. So yeah, I guess that's kind of how those two settings came about.
Did you explore any other places, or was it always those? You mentioned that those two were speaking to you. Did you have other locations that you considered going deep into, or did you always just want to focus the most? I mean, obviously there's other places in the world that come into the story, but it sounds like your heart is kind of with those two places. Were there other places you considered?
I guess those were the two missions. And so those were where I was interested in the dynamics the most between the characters and also what they were doing. But then I did kind of jump to other places as we shot, yes, where I couldn't help. It was almost, I guess, like I was reading, again, these international perspectives that kind of dive into places of reportage. It was almost like I was doing that around the world. Like I was the reporter almost parachuting into an area and researching like what is happening in Mexico City, what is happening in the Bronx, especially when it would touch maybe one of the people that was either on the icebreaker or in the spaceport. We see Love, the interpreter. We kind of follow her partner Rivka as she is and the cities, I believe, would in an apocalyptic situation, the cities would become death traps if you couldn't get out fast enough. And so it's like, what would happen to someone who, we cared about because she's connected to the effort? What happens to her if she can't get out fast enough? And who does get out fast? Like who's got the resources to get out quickly? And so it was, and I remember in Mexico City, it's because I have planes flying to the effort, and they fly over an area, and I kind of drop down into that area and kind of get like a feet on the ground kind of perspective.
Right. And so you have, it's a pretty broad scope that you present, the whole world. Did it ever feel hard to control it? Because I think in the book you do control it, but I know as a writer myself, the final product is really different than how a story evolves. Did it ever feel like there were too many things going on, or did you ever worry about how to bring the story in?
Yes. Was it ever out of hand? Yes.
Okay, that makes me feel better that you said that. If you said you did this first draft, I was going to be really upset with you. Okay.
No, I am extremely lucky that I got an editor who is incredible, Carrick with Grand Central, and she's like editor-in-chief, and she is such a sweetheart, but she's also extremely wise. And the character Gustavo Yp was and his whole tribe, the YP of the Nipiku, was too much. And she said, can you pull him back? Like, it's a beautiful story, but pull him back. You have an ensemble cast. He's out of whack with how much you're giving everyone else. And I think you said last night at your event with Grub Street, dead darlings or kill your darlings. It was kind of the Hemingway, like you have to kill things that matter to you because for the sake of the story. And so I cut 5 chapters from him and brought him more in line. And he is more towards the end as civilization is almost falling down. You find annihilation is nothing new for indigenous cultures in South America or North America. Actually, unfortunately, many of them have been decimated. So I brought him into the end, but yes, it was too sprawling, too out of hand. And my editor's like, okay, here's what I would love for you to do if you can kill your darlings. And I did. So yes.
It is a hard thing to do. I mean, it is really hard to let go of those precious things, especially when you write them and you feel emotionally attached to them. So I totally understand how hard that is. So you had talked about these like what if situations, I would love to explore that a little deeper because I think that, what if is the prompt for like any good story. And especially in this situation, you're imagining something that hasn't happened. So you're relying on real science and, things that have happened, real habitats, real events in the past, and then you're mixing it with projecting it into the future. So I would love to hear how like the what if questions that popped up in your mind, and maybe we could segue that into a conversation about climate fiction in general, which I think is just a big bowl of what if questions.
Yeah. I guess it was one huge what if I didn't really know how to solve is extinction. So I know that I am privileged to not have really thought about extinction or just the end. Will we have an end? Is there an end? Don't all things have some kind of an end and then a new beginning? I guess I was also thinking about just layers of civilization and I love reading books like, speaking of research, like Jared Diamond's Guns, Germs, and Steel, or Sapiens is the new one with just like massive human history and just all the questions I never thought to ask going way back. Because I know sometimes it's just like, okay, there's European history and then there's Persia and then there's the Fertile Crescent. We're done. Wait. I mean, I remember finding out that Neanderthals, I thought they were actually pre-evolved humans, but it's actually, no, that's actually a totally different species that was wiped out. And that, I'm like, wait, there's more than one human species? And it's, bam. So I guess the first what if was, how would people react to the idea of the end? And also just, it could be the end of civilization as that we have built through thousands of years. And so that was my first what if, because I don't know about you guys, but we get a snowstorm and people go bonkers trying to get milk and bread. And it's like, what if we had a comet coming at us with, and we had, and it's a fast timeline. It's about, I think it's like a 9-month timeline. It's less than a year of impact. What would you do with that year? And how would your neighbors react to that year? And how would they react to you reacting? So I guess that was my first what if, it was kind of a strange, and I know I wrote this in a different time. I did not write it now. And I know that many people are just kind of like, did you mean for it to be prescient? And I didn't mean for it to be prescient in that way. I did, it's been wild how I'm launching right now in this time, but you can't pick and choose current events.
Yeah. And I also
know, Julie.
Yes, we're in the thick of it. And I also really like that you kind of expose the good and bad parts of human nature, the way we work against ourselves, but also human resiliency at the same time. And this, even in this, I won't go near, I know we're in no spoiler zone, so I'm not going to go near talking about what happens in the end, but this idea that there is hope out there. So that's not, you can have a terrible ending with hope. Or you can have a great ending with hope. So I just want to talk about the concept of hope, because you present what could be the worst. You present what, human nature at its best at moments, and they're all happening at the same time, which I really love, because we are our best selves and our worst selves at the same time sometimes. So I'm curious about how what you were thinking about human nature and resiliency as you were preparing your characters, because they don't all react the same either, just because we're all different. So maybe you could talk about that a little bit.
I guess when you ask about what if, I thought a lot about war. And I thought about how it brings out both, like you said, the worst and the best of humans. And I mean, we all know the worst. I don't need to get into the worst. We all know the worst. But then there's also, I've heard like some acts of altruism that floor me when I read about war stories, about what people do to save the other soldiers and their troop. Diving, and the obvious example, diving on a grenade. People do that for their brothers, for their sisters. And so I find I thought about this would be kind of like a situation of war where the best and worst of us would come out. But there is also, like I said, the best. And it's because of these two missions, and just because people reach for one another in troubled times. I know I do, that I wanted to show the best as well, and how, that altruism can kind of be such a unique thing to our species, and how beautiful it is. And then, I guess that's one element of hope. And I know that I also wanted to get another element of hope. And Julie, I think you can hear me on this one, is that there's always the hope of the next generation of children who are going to bring about change that maybe the previous generation failed to do. But there's always the hope of the next generation. And I know that you have 4 children, and I've nieces and nephews, and I look to them and I'm like, you are going to pick up the torch, and you're going to be the hope of the world one day. So I definitely wanted it to have, torches of light in the book.
Yeah, I love that, torches of light in the book. That's a great way to describe it. And I think you do that really well. So congratulations on that. And I think maybe it would be nice for the audience maybe to put in context a little bit about what, you and I are both doing, writing climate fiction, which is this kind of new genre. And it's been around a little bit, but it's being talked about more. And it spans from, like, it can be these apocalyptic stories and dystopian stories, and they can be thrillers and mysteries, and it can be a romance story. There's a lot of range in these stories, but they engage climate science. And I think that's a little bit new. And my book, which is a contemporary story, and it's about a scientist trying to prove that an invasive beetle has moved into an area. So it's a very kind of an isolated story in New Hampshire, but it's also engages the larger world. And even though these stories that we're telling are so different, we both have this element of kind of looking toward the future and looking for hope. And I'm curious to see what you're reading in climate fiction, not just in titles, but just in the ideas, and what do you think it offers to readers to be engaging with these stories about climate?
Well, I have on my nightstand that I haven't gotten to yet, but Stanley Kim Robinson, I think he wrote Ministry of the Future, and
yeah,
that was in the Economist 2020 Best Books of the Year. And I'm like watching it, kind of salivating, like I cannot wait to get to that. So that is my next one. What would you say? What recent sci-fi book have you read?
Well, I think we both read Migrations. I think we've talked about that before. Yeah, so Migrations came out this summer, and it's also a book set in the future where a lot of animals have gone extinct, and it's about a woman. It's in a lot of ways that both of our books are about a bigger topic. It's about, a relationship. It's a love story, essentially. And it's about a woman processing grief, and, the climate change is sort of the background of the story. It's what moves the story for the reader, but it's really about this woman's relationship.
Granny.
And Yeah, Franny. Yeah, it was just such a beautiful story. But I'm wondering what you want people to take away from your book, as they think about climate and, how all these stories that we're putting out there, they're all a little bit different. They have a different perspective. But, what do you hope that, adding to the canon of climate fiction can like offer to your readers as they think about, where we are in this moment?
It's a great segue to bring in is Migrations was a gorgeous story, and it dealt with species loss. And that's something that really strikes me as just a tragedy to have, because I guess I grew up, my dad is kind of a naturalist, and there's some people on his walks that he likes to, on the weekends, he goes for walks out in the woods, and he's got a crew here that lots of them join him. And just witnessing nature and seeing all the creatures great and small, that I'm worried about how many I'm worried about deforestation, and I'm worried about the loss of species that are just incredible marvels of evolutionary choices that are kind of thousands of more. So I'm hoping that there will be action, because I know that people can have, and I'm guilty as well. Like, we can all have concern, but not really act on them. I want everyone to I'm hoping that people enjoy the story and fall in love with the characters and have a good time, but also I hope that we prioritize the natural world. Just like my dad and his crew that we go out in the woods, I hope we prioritize the woods, and we keep it so that, speaking of the next generation, we have those woods for our children, and they have them for theirs. So.
Yeah, I love that. And I think you've kind of set up I can make a little plug for an article that I have coming out tomorrow that features Claire's book. It's going to be an electric literature article tomorrow about climate fiction novels that engage species extinction. And so you can read more, a little bit more about Claire's book and other books that are tackling, endangered species and species extinction. And, hopefully it'll, grab some new readers for your book and introduce your readers to some other authors who are writing in this, climate fiction space, which I find it to be a really dynamic group of writers right now who are diving into tackling climate science in fiction, which I find really exciting. I mean, maybe it's just the science nerd in me. It's my favorite thing to talk about, which is why I was so happy when you invited me to be your partner tonight, because I love this story and these characters, and it's just such an important story, but you also tell it with tenderness, and that I think your readers are going to be as attached to the people as they are the story, which I think is a great accomplishment. So congratulations on that. And I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to talk about before we open it up. I know Kathy has been fielding some questions. So were there any other things you wanted to talk about first?
No, I'm like, whew.
You've been great. Like I really do love listening to you talk about your book, because I can tell that you love your book and your characters, and it comes through in your writing and the way you talk about it. And I think that all your readers are going to connect to it that way.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
You both did an amazing job. And actually, you've been answering the questions sort of as they've been coming in a little bit, which is very good. But I did want to open it up to everybody else. I will mention that Lori Beach had said, Claire, she mentioned, did you see this coming a year or two ago? When you
Oh, I did. I know. It's so I started writing this second half of 2016, and I got an agent at the end of 2018. And then I had a year of edits with, as Julie and I say, killing the darlings and getting it tighter. And just also, and I deleted 5 chapters, adding 5 more of backstory and detail and things like that. So 2020, it was finished. And then I had no idea that I would be launching apocalyptic fiction in a pandemic, nor did my publisher. So if there are moments where it's prescient, I mean, it's kind of, it cuts both ways. It's kind of flattering in some way that like I kind of nailed some things, but at the same time, there are moments where I wish I didn't. I feel like sometimes people don't want to maybe read something that's a little too close for comfort. But it can cut both ways. But I did not see a pandemic coming, and I'm glad I did not choose to write about a flu. So I'm glad Station 11 is not launching right now. That would have been a little difficult. But
Yeah.
Still hard to read. A very quick question from Scott. What year is the story set in?
So, good question. The story is actually an alternate 2019. And then as you see, it progresses, but the launch takes place in 2020. So sans pandemic, but yeah. So I was trying to write. I was writing a little bit ahead, but then as I kept, I eventually caught up with the timeline, and it became kind of an alternate present. Yeah. It was strange how I couldn't help writing what was happening into the story. And I know I got a soft knock from a critic on that. It was a nice knock, but I couldn't help that. It was in my head so much and in my heart so much that I had to kind of have it come in. So I'm okay with the knock. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that, sometimes, I've read that science fiction writers often write the science before the scientists get to it because they can imagine things. And, there's always been talk of a pandemic or disasters coming. And so I think it's inevitable that some of these stories come out are going to touch on a little bit of what's happening. And in my book, when you said you started your book in 2016 and finished it in 2018, I was gritting my teeth at you because it took me 13 years to write mine. but my book is about the bark beetle that devastates forests, and it's set the stage for all these forest fires. And when I started writing it 13 years ago, we weren't seeing these devastating forest fires in California and Colorado to the extent that we are now. And now this moment that my book is coming out about this beetle and the fire, people have asked me the same question, like, how did, you must have done so much research. And I was like, I wrote it 13 years ago. I didn't, or I started it. But it's funny how like these moments, they find their time. I think that they work their way into our culture.
Yeah, definitely.
You do think that people might see what's coming. You guys are just very observant. The McFarlanes asked, is this book more about the triumph of the human spirit or the devolution of humanity? The evolution of humanity.
I would, both, probably. I think we would see both. We would see civilization come apart at the seams, and I remember like even small moments of watching like Hurricane Katrina, where you kind of had these moments where it became lawless, but then you'd also have the beauty of relationships and protecting one another shine through as well. And people that aren't just your family, because I know everyone wants to protect their family, but people who you just care about that aren't family, but you want them, they're a family in a way. You love them. So I'd say both. I'd say it is a story of just all we assume, and I guess that's one good thing about apocalyptic fiction. I think apocalyptic fiction gets a bad rap. It is important. It shows how much we kind of see but don't see, like how much we take for granted with having running water, with having a government, with having currency. There's so much that has gone into our civilization that I take for granted every day. And so it's interesting to kind of have these stories where maybe that's taken away and what happens. But then there's also the beauty of people kind of fighting for one another. And then, with each end, there's a beginning. As civilizations in the world have fallen, new civilizations have risen up. What would come in the place of a society that fails for whatever reason? What would be new? What would come out? So I would say both. Erica, thank you. And then Dan, thank you for the question.
I don't know if they have something specific in mind when they ask this, but they asked, do you have specific people in mind when you were writing your characters?
So that's a good question. I guess I would say, I would say that some of the scientists, I have a window into that because I'm married to a very intelligent scientist who goes to a lab every day and just, you know, he's got a PhD, but I guess I've got a little window in the nerd culture, which I'm very happy about. And so I definitely kind of liked to pull from that, like just, and just, you know, I'm kind of a nerd. My friends are nerds. Like I liked kind of bringing the science community that I knew and was familiar with into the story, and in a way that was kind of fun. Like I hope that they have some really fun moments and humor, because I mean they're constantly ball busting, which, you know, as you should be when you're trying to save the world. So I thought that was kind of fun, is bringing the familiarity that I have with the science community, and how much they kind of josh one another. Yeah.
Maybe this is an unfair follow-up, but who was your favorite character and why?
Rough. I loved all of them. I would have to say I really enjoyed writing Rivka, who is our on the feet on the ground in the Bronx. I found her very easy to write, whereas I found Gustavo Waiapi extremely difficult because of him growing up in like an unacculturated tribe in the middle of the Amazon forest. That was extremely difficult. So that was kind of hard to enjoy. Whereas Rivka, I just thought she was just so fun and sassy and just, and she knew what she wanted. She wanted love, and yeah, as well. And just, you know, I loved the dynamic where she partners with a neighbor in her apartment complex, because they need each other. They grab hold of each other because they need to survive, and they try to leave the Bronx. They try to cross over the Harlem River into Manhattan together, because they know if they don't, they'll die. And so I just love the dynamic between her and Lamar, and just how, and of course, you know, are you a Mets fan? Are you a Yankees fan? Like, you have to just kind of bring, like, New York is just so fun. I loved kind of bringing that in. So I really enjoyed Rivka because it was just easy and a delight to read, to write. Whereas the others, some of them took a lot more research and I had to constantly check myself to make sure I wasn't being stereotypical in a way that was sloppy. So yeah, I would say Rivka was my favorite.
I think I have to ask both of you this one from Megan Riley Keeler. What surprised you as you were writing, and did you learn anything about yourself as a writer as you were writing the books?
Sure. Julie, you want to take that first?
Sure. Yeah, so many things surprised me in writing the book. As I said, it took me a really long time. I was raising 4 kids, and it was the same year as I was building my farm. And so the process of building a farm from scratch, writing a novel from scratch, and raising 4 kids from scratch, all was one story for me. And what I've discovered in hindsight, which I didn't consciously do this, but I see my children in my book at different ages. I see my farm in my book, and I also see things that I learned while I was building my farm, things about agriculture and science and climate that I studied as a farmer that are in my story. So I found that I was weaving the three big components of my life together and not really knowing it until, like, in hindsight, when I look back at my book, I see those parts of my life that I inserted into the book because they were all happening kind of at the same time. But I was too close to it at the time to like recognize that I was doing that.
I would mirror so I went to Julie's launch event last night, and she said something great, which is such good advice to, sometimes you need to listen to other people because you are so like this with your story and you're so emotionally invested that sometimes you have to kind of listen to others. And so I would just, as I said with my editor, just how she would just make these precise like suggestions where like, I think you should cut this back, or you know, I really love Jen. She's one of my favorite characters. I'd love to hear more from her. Sometimes it's great to just like step away and listen to other people reacting to your art, because sometimes you just can't see things. You're too close to it. So I would agree with you, Julia. I wrote a lot of notes from last night that definitely, as writers, you have to understand that you get advice from everyone. So I'm not saying all opinions are great. There are definitely some red herrings in there where you can be like, okay, and just don't do it. There are, like, when you start hearing the same things from people whose judgment you trust, it's like, okay, you need to go do that thing that everyone is kind of intimating that you need to do.
Yeah.
So I would say you learn to take advice from the right people as you're writing.
That is very good advice.
And I actually took it. I'm really proud of myself.
Yeah, it sounds like you did a lot of big revision and cutting and killing darlings in that book. So it's hard. It's hard to do those things. So, and I also did that. So I'm very proud of both of us for doing that.
Yeah, proud of us too, Julie. And
good job.
We made it to launch.
We did. We did. And I'm very proud to be here with you and celebrate this moment together, because we both worked hard, and we've been in a Facebook group together where we met of debut authors. And, you know, this is our year. You know, we're the first of our group of debut authors coming out to launch our book. So we've been behind the scenes talking for, you know, almost a year, you know, sharing stories and building up to this moment. And so I am just so excited that I get to do it with you and have our little book twins out in the world today.
Definitely. I'm very excited, and I can't wait to read your article tomorrow in Electric Lit. And everyone, we need to support Main Point Books, because this was a fabulous event. I hope everyone enjoyed it. I had a blast. I know I was talking, but I had a wonderful time talking with Julie, and I really have to thank our host, Kathy, and Main Point Books. They're on Wayne Avenue. They're right by the train station. They're a wonderful bookshop. It's where I get all my books. So just one more pitch, as it's striking 8 o'clock. But Kathy, do you have any parting words?
I was just going to say, thank you both. This is great. I look forward to hosting you both for your next books in person. And if anybody would like signed books, yeah, please order them from our website, and we'll be sure to get them out to you quickly. This was wonderful. Thank you both so much.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you, Julie.
Thanks, Claire.
Thanks everybody else for coming.
Have a great night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.